Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nature in the City Presents. This is our very first attempt at this type of a program for our audiences, and we're so excited that you're here to help us inaugurate tonight. Especially, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and we're honoring his service and the service that we all do for our communities and our families and our friends. So we're so excited to have this day with you to focus on the Green Hairstreak corridor. So this is our agenda. So we'll be at opening, and then we'll turn it over to our guest speaker and some of Nature in the City's team. Then we'll have some time for Q&A, reflections and closing, and then we'll go into our optional breakout sessions. Next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. So we'd like to acknowledge the Ramaytosh Ohlone people, who are the traditional custodians of the land we call San Francisco. We pay our respects to the Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land we're sharing about today, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. And we thank the Ramaytosh Ohlone community for their stewardship and support. And we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Next slide, please. So our community agreements tonight, we just want you to, as you always do in our events, just listen actively, embrace multiple perspectives, participate and share the space with others, amplify voices at the margins, and disagreements are healthy. Just make sure that you're challenging the idea, not the person, and add any of your own that work for you. Next, please. All right, so I'm going to start with a brief introduction of the green hairstreak butterfly. This little butterfly is what tonight is all about. It's bringing us together. It's a nickel-sized butterfly, and it's an iridescent green one. It is found throughout the temperate regions of the world, actually various forms of it. So Europe and North America and Mexico primarily. Right in our place in San Francisco, this butterfly flies in the Golden Gate Heights neighborhood, due mostly to Nature in the City's efforts to restore habitat here, and then also in the Presidio Dunes. I think we have some people joining us from the Presidio team tonight too. We will, next slide. It has a really interesting life cycle. Most people think that butterflies migrate, but this one is very localized. It stays within 200 feet of its original habitat. And like all insects, it has 4 life stages. In the spring, eggs are laid. In the summer, the larvae hatch from those eggs. They eat the leaves, the tiny hairs on the plant, and also the flowers. They turn into 5 different caterpillars, and then they drop into the leaves below the plant. In the summer and winter, they spend time in a hard shell chrysalis at the base of the plant. And then when the first heats of the springtime emerge, you'll see the females emerge first, and then the males. And the adult stage is the stage we all think is so beautiful. That's the stage when mating and habitat disbursement and egg laying occurs. So next slide, please. The Green Hairstreak Corridor, we're so proud to be the stewards of this project. It started in 2007 officially. Today, we have 11 restored habitat sites in the Golden Gate Heights neighborhood. Each of these sites acts as a tiny stepping stone to connect the larger population, create genetic diversity, and strengthen the population overall. So we're really excited that in this neighborhood, we helped this butterfly to avoid local extinction. And I'd like to turn it over at this point to Sarah Gomes, who is the brand new Western Science Coordinator for Monarch Joint Venture. And she works for Nature in the City, and we just love her so much. And she did a really beautiful thesis that she'd like to share the highlights from tonight. So turn it over to you, Sarah.
All right, well, let's scoot back a bit. Sorry, Laura, thank you. Okay, so it's so nice to be here, and I see so many familiar faces. I'm just really happy to share all this with you. As Amber mentioned, I'll be sharing a little bit about my thesis, which focused on the coastal green hairstreak butterfly within nature in the city's restored habitats. My thesis was titled Coastal Fog and Butterflies: How Does Microclimate Impact Butterfly Habitat in San Francisco? And it had three major parts: a historical biogeography section, a plant butterfly interaction section, and a plant physiology section. For the sake of time today, I'm going to kind of skim over some of the nitty-gritty methods and details like that, and just share some of the highlights that I found most interesting with you. All right, so to begin, an overview of just how important microclimate is to butterflies throughout all stages of their life. So in the adult stage, their flight is entirely dependent on weather conditions. They need sun in order to fly. As their eggs hatch and the little caterpillars come out, we know through past studies that topography and sun exposure will influence that larval development. As Amber mentioned, the green hairstreak drops to the base of the coast buckwheat plant to form its chrysalis, and this really dense canopy that you see in tile D provides warmth and shelter for this butterfly throughout the coldest months of the year. And then the following spring, weather patterns control their emergence in the next flight season. All right, for a brief history of urbanization, I'd like to share with you this map that some of you might be familiar with. It's called The Ecology and Natural History of San Francisco, Wild in the City, and it's by Nancy Morita. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'd like to just focus on the left-hand map, which showcases San Francisco before modern development, so 1750 and before. This map shows some of the land cover and different habitats that we had in the city, or we have. And this golden sandy color represents the sand dune habitat for this green hairstreak butterfly. And you'll notice through this image that really it's most of the western half of the city that supported green hairstreaks in the past. As part of my history section, I went to the California Academy of Science and I sorted through their entire specimen collection. And I used this information to map out where these butterflies were found historically, and then also track them throughout the different decades. So I made the following map of San Francisco. And I highlighted some of the locations where this butterfly was found. And again, we see it's entirely on the western half of the city. That's not because they weren't looking for them on the eastern half. In fact, naturalists were looking all over the city for butterflies at the time, but they're really restricted to this western coastal habitat as their name implies. All right, in the next slide, I have two pictures side by side looking from the Pacific Ocean back towards the Sunset District. And as we know, the discovery of gold is what really sparked this rapid urbanization of San Francisco. Gold was discovered in 1894. And at the time, or just before gold was discovered, the population of San Francisco was about 400 people. And in the first year that followed, that 400 shot up to 40,000 people in just 1 year. So this really categorized the urbanization of San Francisco into the future too. I mean, it tried so hard to keep up with this massive population boom. So that being said, urbanization reached the Sunset District in the 1870s or so, and the heaviest era of development occurred between 1935 and 1946. And here we have 4 side-by-side images of the Sunset District. Here we're looking out from the hillside towards the Pacific Ocean, so the opposite point of view. And we see just how much of the habitat is lost each decade. Something worthwhile to point out, if you see next to the 1946 image, I put a picture of the Xerces blue, which shared the same habitat as the green hairstreak butterfly. And it's most famously known for being the first American butterfly to go extinct as a direct result of human development. So that extinction happened in 1941. We start to see the green hairstreaks really go downhill. And then in 1950s, the local lepidopterists start to record the green hairstreaks losing struggle with man's encroachment, as they put it. Here's an example of some of this construction. You might recognize this area. It's 15th and Kintara, known as Kintara Steps, as it was being constructed in the late 1920s. So this is an example of what its habitat looked like before, and it's really clear just how hard it is for this butterfly to persist when this is happening all over the place. But with that being said, the butterflies nearly went extinct for about 50 years, and then Nature in the City stepped in to restore its habitat. And now, thanks to the efforts by Nature in the City and its wonderful volunteers, this Kintara Steps is the most populated site in the entire green hairstreak corridor. So that's all to say, your effort makes a difference, and the butterflies, thank you very much. All right, so moving on to the second portion of my study, we really focused on plant-butterfly interactions at Kintara Steps to get the best chance at really getting to know these butterflies. And you'll see in the left-hand image that I highlighted our study area in this red rectangle. So as you see in the second picture, I sat along the edge and observed how these butterflies interacted with seaside daisy plants. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, adult flight is entirely dependent on weather conditions, right? So almost every study that you hear of includes butterfly observations on sunny, warm days with ideal flight conditions. However, since we are really interested in how coastal fog impacts their habitat, we also observe these butterflies on foggy days, and that's what you see pictured here in the right. So we were lucky enough to find one butterfly on a foggy day, and we watched that same butterfly for about an hour or two and recorded every little behavior as well as the microclimate conditions at that time. And while most people walking by would think, oh, you know, they're just hanging out, they're not doing much today, actually they're very alert and constantly moving around these plants in search of the best microclimate. What I mean by that is, you see here, this butterfly is nestled into the base of the coast buckwheat plant. It's being sheltered by some of those leaves. So when strong winds would come in from the west, the butterfly would move itself to the eastern portion of the plant. As winds got stronger, it would nestle itself deeper and deeper into the base of the plant. And the second any sun poked out from the clouds, it would crawl right up to the top of the plant and bask in the sun, ready to fly at any given moment. So that's a really unique and interesting piece of our study that you might not find elsewhere. All right, so my parents were my lovely field assistants that season, and we went out to Kintara Steps and observed this group of seaside daisy plants in that northeast corner. And each plant was a little bit different in terms of its size, number of flowers, and these different characteristics that we measured. And the goal here was really to figure out, given this choice of seaside daisies, which plant will they choose to visit the most and why? All right, so what we found, first I'll mention that this image on the side is a top-down diagram that I made of the seaside daisy plants. And we see just by these numbers that there's a very clear preference for plant A. And when we analyzed the data, we found that the characteristics that influence visitation included plant size, floral display, or the number of open flowers, flower size, and proximity to that largest plant, which is plant A. So plant A was the largest plant. It had the greatest number of open flowers. It also had the largest flowers, and all of this is associated with greater nectar reward. And then when I mentioned proximity to that largest plant, you'll see that D had more visits than C, even though C was a bigger plant. And so that's why I mentioned that proximity to the plant, because it influences the foraging distance to get from flower to flower. So all that is to say, butterflies chose to visit plants with the greatest potential reward while exerting the least amount of energy. And if you flip to the next image, here's an example of a really nice established seaside daisy plant. And you can see that if a butterfly lands on this plant, there's an abundance of nectar for it to choose from. And so it seems to be really attracted to these large plants. All right, what do we do with this information? Based on our results, there are a few things that we can recommend you consider when planning a habitat. The first is foraging distance. So by clustering these nectar plants, it limits the distance butterflies need to fly to get to its next nectar resource. Another thing is plant size. Remember that larger plants are associated with greater nectar reward. So making effort to maintain those larger plants when possible will really help those plants be more attractive. And then, of course, consider microclimate. These really dense canopies not only provide a lot of nectar, but they also provide warmth and shelter in inclement weather in times like very foggy days. All right, so zooming in once more, we focus on plant physiology. And in this section, we were really curious to figure out at the leaf level, how does fog influence plant function? We know from other studies that fog plays a crucial role in supporting ecosystem function around the world. Fog can actually improve plant function in a number of ways, but in our study, we chose to focus on fog as a water resource. So there are three mechanisms that reduce plant water stress. The first of which is reduced evapotranspiration. So if we use this image to the right as an example, that cooler breeze and the moisture in the air reduces evaporation of water from the soil, but also at the leaf level. So you might remember that plants' leaves have little pores called stomata. And when they photosynthesize, those pores open and close, and that allows water and gas to travel in and out of the leaf. So in other words, when there's all this moisture in the air, the plant doesn't have to worry so much about losing water as it opens and closes those stomata. The second mechanism is through fog drip to the soil. You might notice on foggy days, everything seems kind of wet and drippy, and a lot of that fog water will actually get funneled down the base of the plant and increase the shallow soil moisture beneath it. And then lastly, foliar uptake is another way to say uptake directly through the leaves. So when the leaves get saturated, some plants, especially those in foggy environments, are able to take in water directly through those stomata in the leaves. All right, so here's an example of a seaside daisy in the fog. What you'll see is that their leaves are very saturated, and there's all sorts of fog droplets that are beating up on the little hairs of the leaves and stems and buds. So this is a really good indicator that this plant is efficient at harvesting fog. All right, and for a brief overview of our methods, we took potted seaside daisy plants. We actually did this in our backyard thanks to the pandemic, and it was a really cool portion of the study. So we took these seaside daisy plants and placed them within plastic fog chambers. And then we manipulated those plants so that they were exposed to different treatment groups. And this is so that we could pull apart the importance of fog and irrigation and compare them between plants. So some plants received fog only, some plants received irrigation only, some plants received both fog and irrigation, and our control plants received neither. And then at the very end, we measured their response at the leaf level with a portable photosynthesis system, which is what you see me doing on the right. And that allowed us to measure real-time photosynthesis and stomatoconductance, or the opening and closing of those pores, real time, which was really fascinating. And what we found is that coastal fog improves the physiological function of seaside daisy plants, especially when those plants don't receive irrigation. So fog consistently improved plant function, and that increase was greater when plants did not receive irrigation. So fog becomes more important when soil moisture is low, for example, during periods of drought. And an interesting piece of our study is that the fog-only plants actually had higher photosynthesis rates than irrigation-only plants. And we hypothesize that that mechanism driving that pattern is foliar uptake. And so what this tells us is that these plants have evolved in this foggy habitat for thousands of years. And over that time, they've become really efficient at capturing moisture from the air, especially when soil moisture is really low, for example, from drought. All right, what can we do with this information? These results can really help us improve plant function and survival over time. So something to consider is microclimate, of course. Try to maximize fog exposure when you can. And another really interesting recommendation is to utilize the slope that we have here. So most of the habitats in the Green Hairstreak corridor are on a hillside. And so we have this unique opportunity to use gravity to irrigate the plants beneath it. This picture right here is an excellent example of fog drip. You see at the top of the slope, this coastal sagebrush, which is a really excellent fog harvester. And all the fog drip beneath it is really obvious. And so by planting those really efficient fog harvesters upslope from other plants, we can use gravity to irrigate the plants beneath them. And then lastly, another option is to install fog collectors that can collect that atmospheric moisture, and then you can use it to irrigate a plant. So if you're interested in reading further, we have some links included in the chat box to my thesis, as well as our research article. And I'm always happy to talk about this, so feel free to reach out anytime, and you'll also have an opportunity to chat in the breakout rooms. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for your beautiful, just the time you spent in the corridor and that incredible willingness to observe and make great suggestions. And I don't know if you all know, she didn't mention it, but she and her family built the fog collecting units at home themselves. So I think that's, yeah, it's just really beautiful to see the lengths that we will go to learn more about our natural world. So thank you so much, Sarah. Everyone will have more time to connect with Sarah during the breakouts and the Q&A session. But first, I'd like to introduce Nature in the City's stewardship coordinator and gardening crew lead, Amelia Egeland, to give you some more updates about current happenings in the corridor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah. There's so much there that I really look forward to putting into practice with all of our stewards and volunteers. And I'm Amelia, Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. Um, our monthly work days with volunteers and neighbors, they've been going on since 2007. So this project has really involved so many dedicated individuals. Um, and a note on, I think Sarah started the iNaturalist project. And that's a really helpful app that a lot of users can record their sightings. And some data from that is it's over 5,000 observations from 484 observers, looking at almost 1,000 different species throughout the corridor, which is really a testament to this slice of the world being so full of life, which is really exciting. And I know that monitoring will continue to be an important part of the work that's going on. So I really encourage everyone, if you don't have that downloaded, to go ahead and download it and take a stroll through the corridor. We started off this planting season at our 16th Avenue Tiled Steps location, and we had a great turnout, kind of a good combo of regular volunteers, neighbors, and some new students, new faces. And it was a really, really great day to get it started. And so far, we've planted about 100 of our 450 plants raised in the Backyard Native Nursery network. And I just wanted to, give a shout out to any stewards who are here on the call. I know Leah was a huge help in getting that planting day going, and she's stewarded that site. Another sort of update is that we have a new site at Garden for the Environment in the Inner Sunset, which is right near our nursery. And a couple of our various sites received new signs. I know I've seen Barbara's sign at 12th and Pacheco, which is lovely, and it has some similar photos of the history of the sunset that Sarah was presenting, which I know is really fascinating for all of us to see. And that's sort of a guiding light for why we all come together to work on this. So those are really helpful for just getting the word out and getting the neighborhood involved. So we would love to see more of that happen. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so more on that. We really would love to get more visibility for the project and more resources to help newcomers learn about these native plants, and guide new volunteers into what's what. And I know a lot of people present on the call are really helpful because we have some background in native plants. So we always love to get as many familiar people at these work days to help new volunteers. And we are starting a new work day on Fridays from 1 to 3. That's really focusing in the Green Hairstreak corridor and helping to revitalize some of the sites that have had stewards move away or move on to other projects. So I know I want to invite anyone who's interested to the breakout room I'll be in at the end of our call coming up shortly. Friday is going to be a great day to get involved, but we also have a work day coming up this weekend, which I believe is our third Saturday. And that's our Green Hairstreak work day as well. And we also, something that we've been doing more, and we hope to continue our corporate work days to get larger groups involved. And again, just spreading awareness about this project and the important work that's been going on. I know a lot of people want to get involved, and it's a great team building experience. And we've been able to lead some really successful corporate work days, which has been really exciting. So again, I invite anyone who's wanting to be involved in this project, please stay on the call in my breakout room. because we really need some new site stewards. And I think our next slide gets more into that. We're kind of estimating it's about 25 to 50 hours of a commitment. I know a lot of our stewards have done way more than that, but each site does need an active steward throughout the season. Right now we're doing planting, but as Sarah was saying, we really could have some more focused maintenance in keeping those larger seaside daisies going. And then, yeah, we're also going to have other work days that I'm sure a lot of you have been to or at least aware of. So feel free to check out our meetup site. There's lots of detail there, and our calendar as well on our website. I look forward to seeing you come out. Yeah, so these are a few of our sites that we know needs a steward, although if you happen to live near any of these other sites, we would love to have you. And you can get in contact with me about the Friday work days, but we also have our third Saturday as well. And the sites that we need specifically are Aloha and Lolita, which is our first site on the map, our 16th Avenue tiled steps. I know Leah has been working there because she lives so close, but it's a larger site, so we could definitely use some support there. And the 15th and Noriega Triangle as well. So those are our first 3 sites on the map. But again, feel free to join us in the breakout room to discuss this a little further. You're always welcome to. We really would love to see more native plants in and around the city in general. So that's a great way to also get involved, is by planting natives in your own yard. I think with that, I might turn it to our next, maybe back to Amber.
Yes, thank you so much, Amelia. Someone in the chat asked for the speaker details, so we might ask you to screenshot this or some way that you can record these folks for the future. And we'd like to open it up to Q&A at this point, so we can leave it on this slide so that people have a chance to jot down email addresses and contact. So during the Q&A, we may not get to every question because we only have a limited time for those, but we just ask you to say your name, maybe your affiliation, and then address the question to a specific person that you heard from today. And you are also welcome to pop questions into the chat, and we will be monitoring there too. So I will open up the floor, just unmute yourselves and feel free. Or I'm sorry, you should probably raise your hand and we'll call on you. That's the better way to go so that we don't have too many folks at once. All right, I see Gwendolyn. Please ask us your question.
Well, actually, I see in the chat that my question about the host plants, which are the group of host plants that are best for the Hairstreak, and are there any companion plants that kind of seem like they help?
Yes. That's a great question. We have a really great list, a full list on our website. If you go to Nature in the Cities project page for the Green Hairstreak Corridor, you can download the PDF there. The 2 host plants are coast buckwheat and deerweed. So those are the 2 that they lay their eggs primarily on. And then, as Sarah was saying, the seaside daisy and the other plants that we plant in the corridor are up to 50 different species that are all representative of the upland dune habitat community. Okay, and then I see Deborah next.
Hi, my name is Deborah Singer. I live in Oakland now, but I lived in San Francisco for a long time, and I'm curious. I guess it's a question for Sarah or someone who spent a lot of time at the sites that you're regenerating. Have you noticed other types of butterflies or other insects or bird, like just more activity from other creatures too?
That's an excellent question. I think that the iNaturalist project really showcases a lot of the other species that we have. And Amber might be able to speak more on if that changed over time better than I could probably.
Yeah, thank you. It's really funny how instant it can be. I remember participating in some pop-up native plant gardens throughout my time in San Francisco, and instantaneously you have plant and animal interactions, and it's the same was true for the corridor. One example I can share is that we had a big group out in April. We were pulling out grasses that were up to our waists and showing the coast buckwheat plants. So we'd pull out the grasses, the butterflies would instantly land on them. We've also seen, so many, almost 1,000 different species in the corridor. And it's hard to, we could probably look over time at iNaturalist and see some change, but it's pretty amazing to see. There's beetles, there's salamanders, there's birds, insects feed birds. So we know that the more insects you have in a garden, the more bird visitations you'll have as well. So we know that these habitats are really supporting a massive amount of life that is almost imperceptible to us because we're so large, to see the difference. Go ahead, Bet.
Yeah, Amber, we have a question from Susan. And the question is, how do we make the fog catcher that Sarah mentioned?
Oh, Sarah, do you have an answer for that?
Sort of, yes. So let me just reorganize so I can see well. Okay, there's a few different ways to make fog collectors, but one example would be to have kind of two posts that sit upright and then a mesh that attaches between the two of them. And then beneath it, they usually put some kind of funnel that, how could I explain this? So you've got your two poles and the funnel would go underneath the mesh and then down the pole into some sort of container. And then you could just use that to water it. There's all sorts of science, I'm sure, behind what type of mesh to use. So I would be happy to look into that and then share more information later if possible.
Great question, Susan.
Yeah, great question.
And we're like right on time. So I might ask you others that have questions directly for different members of the team tonight to hold them until we breakout rooms. So I think since it's just it's 6:10 now, so we're going to turn it over to Bet, who's going to share with us some more information about other ways you can get involved in nature and city.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks, Sarah and Amelia. Really fascinating to hear all about the fog and the butterfly. I wanted to say, first of all, a big thank you to all our members and donors. I know a lot of you are here tonight, and we so appreciate that. I think your individual contributions make up about 16% or maybe a bit more of our budget. And we couldn't do this work without our community. So thank you very much. And I wanted to let you know we've introduced something new. Towards the end of the last year, we decided that students could really benefit from becoming members of Nature in the City. So we're making annual memberships free for full-time students. So if there are any students here and you're not a member already, please email us at info@natureinthecity.org. And if you're out of school and you're not a member, we welcome you to join. Members get early bird invitations to events like these, although this was open to everybody, it being the inaugural one. But please consider joining Nature in the City. I also wanted to let you know that we will have two raffle winners this evening. So Laura and I will be popping into the breakout rooms later and letting you know if you won a membership at the $100 level. And if you are already a member, this might make a lovely gift for someone. So that will be upcoming in the breakout rooms. And we're highlighting a few of our grantors here, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. that made our year-end challenge match possible. And so many of you helped us exceed that goal this year. Again, big thank you. The March Conservation Fund, the Woodman Foundation, EJF Philanthropies, and our wonderful neighborhood partnership grantor Sharp. And also, we do so many things at Nature in the City. We have a gardening services program, and Ryan and Amelia and their teams are excellent at what they do. They can help you figure out what plant to plant where and at the right time. So check out our website if you're interested in gardening services, and we have 10% discount until the end of February if it's your first service. The next Nature in the City Presents will be Peter, who's here on the call this evening. Peter Brastow, he recently went to the UN Biodiversity Conference in Montreal, and he'll be talking about that and San Francisco's Climate Action Plan. So I think that's going to be a very interesting presentation, and I hope you can make it. And we will be having a wonderful walk in April to hopefully see the beautiful butterflies in flight, and members will receive an invitation to that. So thank you again for being here. Looking forward to hearing more of your comments and meeting you in the breakout rooms. Oh, and the date of that next virtual event is to be determined. We will let you know.
Thank you so much, Bet. I will take the stage back quickly to thank also Laura Castellini, who is incredibly instrumental in making all of this happen tonight. She sets the groundwork. She's the reason why this is so organized and flowing so well. She's done a massive amount of planning to make this happen. And also Rebecca Fine, who's helping us to host tonight, and our presenters and all of you audience members that make it possible to be here and have a great time tonight. So if you would have some feedback or ideas for future Nature in the City Presents events, please follow the link in the chat and fill out our quick survey. We'd love to hear from you. And we will start our breakout rooms momentarily. So we'll give you a quick refresher on how this is done. So we'll have 2 breakout rooms, one about community